Hello, America. Events at the Capitol last week troubled a lot of Americans. People already have competing ideas on how to respond. Lindsey Graham and other Republicans want us to unify and move forward, and I'm all for that. But as an ultimate outcome, before you can move forward from something like this, a few things have to happen first. You need to generally agree on the facts of what happened. There's still a ton of voices out there saying it was an Antifa false flag, popularized by people like Laura Ingraham and Matt Gaetz immediately after the event. You also need to at least have a public discussion about it to try and understand, as a country, why did this happen, what does it mean for us, and who, if anyone, could be at fault. If anyone is found at fault, they need to be held accountable. Then we can unify and move on. Lindsey Graham is calling to unify after the day this happened, and if you skip those first few steps, that's not healing. That's glossing over. So in this video, I'm going to give my take on the first two areas. The facts of what happened and understanding how did we get to this point as a country? How did we get so far apart? This video isn't about judging or condemning. Maybe I'll save that for the next one. So if you just want someone to tell you Trump supporters are bad or liberals are hypocrites because of the BLM riots, there's plenty of other pundits that'll tell you that. This is about understanding where we're at and how we got here. Now, originally, this whole series was going to research and address election fraud claims, but given that the events at the Capitol were mostly motivated by those, we're going to pivot to this as our topic for the next few videos. So what actually happened at the Capitol? Was it an insurrection? Was it a mostly peaceful protest that just got out of hand? What actually happened? The facts are these. It started with a large Save America rally where Trump and his close circle spoke to the crowds about their election fraud claims. I can't find exact numbers, so just estimating from photos and videos, it looked like there were at least tens of thousands of people there, maybe 250,000 according to Trump. After the rally, thousands broke past police lines onto the grounds of the Capitol building, and I'm guessing probably hundreds broke into the building. Inside, there was vandalism and theft, including Nancy Pelosi's laptop, a podium, and other paraphernalia. Multiple people in the chamber had zip ties out, which is probably a safe bet they intended harm or capture. Several pipe bombs were found. A man had a cache of weapons, including 11 Molotov cocktails, which were more like homemade napalm according to the charges filed. We have people on video saying they're there to start a revolution. There were reports that people were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," and making other violent plans. And 5 people died, one of whom was a police officer. So there's a few key takeaways here. Out of the many thousands of people at the rally, most of them probably didn't take part in storming the Capitol, much less intend to force the government to make Trump the next president. But there's concrete evidence that at least a number of them did intend to, and that some of them had plans to kidnap or seriously harm some of the highest government officials. So given these, I feel pretty justified in calling this an insurrection or coup. And again, I'm not referring to everyone who attended the general rally. There were plenty who peacefully walked away. But we still call Benghazi a terrorist attack. We still call the BLM events riots. Having other people there who were nonviolent doesn't mean it's not a riot or attack, or in this case, insurrection. So how did we even get to the point where there's an insurrection in the capital of the United States? How have we gotten this divided? Everyone, even the insurrectionists, at least think they're doing the right thing. No matter what the pundits tell you, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, "I'm off to do something I know is wrong. I sure hate freedom and democracy." Maybe there is one psychopath in 10 million, but that's not what we saw. Those people believed they were doing the right thing. And what gets me is the people on the left and right are angry and feel threatened by the same value. Every average citizen, Republican and Democrat, wants to protect free and fair elections. The difference comes back to, what do you think is threatening that value right now? Do you believe there was massive election fraud or not? If you do think there was, then the people's will is being overturned and there's already been a quiet coup to take over the government that you need to defend it against. If you don't think there was, then that means the president is the one who's attacking democracy and undermining faith in free and fair elections in order to overrule the people's will. Same intent, the only difference is what set of facts you're using, whether there was fraud or not. So the next question is why, in the information age, do we live in these separate realities where we can't even agree on basic facts? Everyone likes to think they're rational and make decisions based on evidence and logic, but I think a lot of us overestimate ourselves, especially in today's world. None of us actually know anything about the world outside our own personal experience other than what people in the media or on the internet or our friends tell us. More on that in my very first video. So when an election happens and somebody says, look, there was a ton of fraud, and shows us a whole bunch of evidence, we're trusting that they're actually basing that on true, valid facts, and not just making things up, or twisting things, or using bad analyses, even though we really have no way of knowing. Then somebody else comes back and says, well, that's not right. These are the right facts. You're debunked. And we don't know if their facts are right either. And this can go back and forth forever. You debunk someone, somebody debunks your debunking, and on. And we never figure out whose facts are complete or true. There's always more facts to find or twist. But at some point, you don't have the time or resources to investigate every single fact yourself. You still have to make a decision about who you believe and for what parts of their claims. So there are quick rules of thumb, heuristics, to get a decent guess at the truth when we can't research every fact for ourselves. Like, is this coming from someone credible? Is it consistent with what other credible sources are saying? What are this person's possible incentives for saying it? Or just, does this make logical sense with what I already know? And it's really hard to get agreement with people. We disagree on who's credible. We stop looking for new facts once we find things or hear somebody say something that confirms what we already believe. We assume the worst intentions from our opponents and the best from people who we see is on our side. So when people who think the election was rigged say, look at these mountains of evidence Trump found, how can anyone still think this was fair? Liberals aren't stupid, they're not ignoring it. They just don't trust the credibility of the person making the original claim, that they're not just twisting facts around or leaving out context for their own benefit. Or they think all the other people and agencies who disagree have more credibility. Or they found information that contradicts Trump's claims. And people who don't think there was widespread fraud might look at someone who believes it and go, how can they possibly still believe that when everyone else disagrees? Do they really think it's a conspiracy across liberals, all the different state election officials, his own judges, his own lawyers, and his own agencies? Well, okay, that's actually pretty accurate, but it undersells some important context. From their perspective, the guy you trust, the guy who's never steered you wrong before, the guy who's fighting a bunch of communists that hate him and his supporters, the only guy who's still protecting American values and fighting for the little guy, that guy stands up and says, those people I've been fighting, they cheated. And I have them dead to rights. I have proof. Irrefutable proof. Before this election, you didn't know what ballot harvesting or signature matching or any of that stuff was. Nobody did, left or right. But the guy you trust is telling you there's a problem with it now, along with a ton of other things. Are you going to believe the people that were fighting him tooth and nail this whole time when they stand up and say, nope, I debunked that, fake news? To be clear, there was no election fraud on the mass scale that Trump claimed. But I just want everyone to appreciate this. It's not as simple as denial. It's not as simple as a lack of education. It's not as simple as just being a Republican problem. There's a reason these beliefs started and are staying so persistent. And liberals very much had a part in this too. I'll get to that in another video though. Either way, left or right, how do so many people get so entrenched in their point of view that we can't even imagine why the other side still thinks the way they do? And we're so sure that our side is right that people are willing to try and overthrow the government for it. It's feedback loops. Trust builds more trust. You start with a little bit of trust for someone. Maybe they sound just a little more authentic to you. Maybe they don't mince their words like most politicians. The right person can take that little bit of trust and manipulate that and build on it until eventually you're the only person they trust. And when the only person you trust tells you something, it doesn't matter what anyone else says. There's two things off the top of my head that are like rocket fuel to building this absolute trust thing. First, continued investment. So if they can get you to do something for them or give them something, even something as simple as choosing a side with them in a disagreement, you give them a little bit of your support, and you're more likely to want to justify it and support them again. That means they're incentivized to pick fights, have more disagreements, so their base has to choose them more and more, and they solidify their support. Second, emotion. The bread and butter of partisanship. If they can get you afraid of something or angry at someone, or best of all, convince you there's a real enemy out there trying to get you, your defenses and objectivity drop way down. And hey, sometimes these things are justified, sure. But just stay real alert if you start to see things like a leader constantly picking disagreements or picking fights. That's them trying to get you to keep investing in them. If they start pointing towards other people and saying they're the enemy, especially if they tell you what other people's motivations are. They hate us. They want to destroy how we live. They're not real Americans. They hate America, and we have to protect ourselves from them by fighting. Fighting, coincidentally, usually means donating your money to them or buying their books or showing up for their rallies. I'm picking on Republicans right now because, well, there was an attempted insurrection in the name of Trump at the Capitol last week. But it's a good reminder for everyone, once the immediate danger passes, to take a step back and at least just ask the question, how much of this applies to me? Looking back before 2016, has my circle of trusted information sources changed? Who did I trust then that I don't trust now, and vice versa? Can I point out any good points about the other side and their leaders, no matter what I think of them overall? Do I generalize about large groups of other Americans and their motivations? Right now, there's a lot of focus on Trump supporters, and rightfully so. This just happened, we're still processing it and responding to it. But when we're ready to heal and move on, we can't move forward without understanding each other first, and at least taking a step back and asking those questions of ourselves. That wraps up this video for now. The next one's going to be about Trump, whether he has any responsibility for this, and whether impeachment is the right move. So if you want to keep the conversation going, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you next time.